The war had lasted too long. Planets were burning, ships were falling, and soldiers were dying every hour. The stars no longer looked beautiful. They only showed the places where someone had just been destroyed. The Deathworld Alliance had tried everything, but now they were losing, badly. Inside a dark room on a floating station deep in space, the leaders of the Alliance sat around a round table. The air was heavy. No one spoke for a long time. Some of them were injured. Some were too tired to care. But all of them were afraid. General Korloth, the oldest and strongest of them, stared at the blinking red light on the screen. That red light showed another one of their planets had fallen. He slowly stood up, his voice deep and cold. "We have no more time," he said. "We need help." The others looked at him. They knew what he meant. But no one wanted to say it. "You wanna call them?" asked High Commander Velra. Her voice was sharp, but her eyes were wide with fear. "Yes," Korloth answered. "We call the humans." Silence followed. Not even the computers made a sound. Only the hum of the station's life support could be heard. It felt like the stars themselves had stopped moving. "You know what they are," said Velra. "You've seen what they do? You've heard the stories." "I have," Korloth said. "And that's why I know they are the only ones who can save us." "They don't fight like us," said another leader, his long fingers tapping nervously on the table. "They don't stop, they don't care. They destroy everything." Korloth nodded. "That's why they win." Another light turned red on the screen. Another planet gone. Another million lives lost. "We called every peaceful world," Korloth said. "We begged for weapons, soldiers, ships. No one came. No one is left. Except the humans." Velra leaned back. Her face was pale. "If we call them, they will come. And if they come, they will stay." "I know," Korloth said. He pressed a button on the console. The screen turned blue. A simple message appeared. "To Earth Command from Deathworld Alliance Central Command Subject. Emergency request for military assistance." Korloth looked at the others one last time. No one stopped him. They had already lost. Maybe the humans could help. Or maybe they would become a bigger problem. He pressed send. A minute passed, then 5, then 10. Then the reply came. A cold, simple message. Message received. Task Force. Deployed. ETA. 17 hours, 17 hours. Velra looked at the message, then at Korloth. "They were already ready," she whispered. "They were waiting." Korloth didn't answer. He stared at the screen, but his mind was somewhere else. He remembered the last time he saw humans fight. He remembered the smoke, the fire, the silence after the attack. He remembered the faces of the enemy soldiers, what was left of them. Now those humans were coming here. The Alliance had made the call. The humans were on their way. 17 hours later, every ship in the Alliance's main fleet gathered near, a small moon. They waited in silence. No music, no lights, no cheers. Just fear. Then the space around them bent. A shadow moved across the stars. One moment, there was nothing. The next, a massive ship appeared. It didn't make a sound. It was black, shaped like a long blade. Its surface seemed to absorb all light. There were no windows, no flags. No welcome. Just a symbol on the side. A human skull covered by a metal helmet. "They're here," someone whispered. The human ship moved slowly, like a predator watching its prey. It stopped near the command ship of the Alliance. A message came through. "This is Commander Riker, Human Forces, permission to board." Velra looked at Korloth. He nodded. "Let them in." Moments later, a group of humans entered the command ship. They walked in silence, wearing dark armor. Their eyes were cold, their faces hard. No fear, no questions. One of them stepped forward. He was taller than the others. His armor was heavier. His face had scars. This was Commander Riker. He looked at the gathered alien leaders, then spoke. "Show us where they hurt you." That was all he said. No long greetings. No promises. Just that one sentence. The leaders showed them the maps, the lost planets, the enemy's movements. The humans asked for details, numbers, defenses, weather patterns. Their questions were fast, sharp, to the point. They weren't planning a battle. They were planning a hunt. Korloth watched them uneasy. These weren't soldiers. These were killers. Professionals. He had seen warriors. He had fought wars for 300 years, but he had never seen anything like this. That night, no one slept. Not the humans. Not the aliens. Everyone waited. Then, without warning, it happened. The humans left the command ship in complete silence. No engines were heard, no lights were seen. They vanished into the stars. An hour later, the largest enemy base on the nearest planet exploded. No warning. No chance to escape. The base was gone. Nothing was left. The enemy didn't even fire back. They didn't have time. Back in the command ship, a red alert rang. The aliens rushed to the control room, expecting another attack from the enemy. But what they saw on the screen made their blood run cold. The enemy was running away. Their ships were jumping to random locations. Some left behind weapons. Others sent messages begging for peace. "What happened?" Velra asked. One of the alien officers turned to her, his eyes wide. "They're afraid," he said. "They're afraid of the humans." In the next few days, more enemy bases were destroyed, one by one, no survivors, no signals. The attacks were quiet, fast, perfect. The humans never missed. Some of the alien leaders began to worry. "They're not stopping," said one. "Why would they?" asked another. "They're enjoying it." In secret rooms, the Alliance began to talk. Not about the enemy, but about the humans. "They don't fight like us," Velra said. "They don't fight for defense, they fight to win, no matter the cost." Korloth sat in silence. He looked at the stars again. They still didn't shine. "We called for help," he said. And help came. He looked at the human ships in the distance, "But I'm not sure if we called the right kind." Velra looked at him. "We asked for fire and they gave us a sun." Outside, the humans prepared for their next strike. The enemy was breaking, but so was the Alliance. And somewhere deep in space, the humans smiled. They had been waiting for a war like this, and now they had it. The stars were quiet, but the silence felt heavier now. The human ship floated above the damaged planet like a shadow that refused to move. Below, the fires from the enemy base still burned, but no one dared to return, not even the enemy. Inside the Alliance command ship, there was confusion and worry. The attack had been fast, too fast. No one had seen it coming, and no one knew how it was done. The humans didn't speak much, but their results spoke louder than any words. The leaders of the Alliance gathered again. Their expressions had changed. They were no longer tired. They were uncertain. They watched the human team through hidden cameras. The humans were quiet, but everything they did had purpose. They moved with calm steps. They didn't show fear. They didn't ask for thanks. One of the alien officers whispered to another. "They don't even celebrate." "They don't need to," the other replied. "It's not new to them." On the ground, the first group of humans walked carefully through the broken remains of the enemy's defenses. Their scanners moved in all directions, searching for traces of danger. Nothing escaped their attention. One of them paused near a control tower and tapped a small device against the metal wall. The tower vanished in a quiet burst of blue light, leaving behind only dust. An Alliance scout watched from above. He had seen many battles in his life, but this was different. He whispered into his communicator, "They don't destroy things like we do. They erase them." Back in the command room, Commander Riker stood alone near the viewing window. His eyes followed the stars. Korloth stepped beside him. He had questions, many, but he chose just one. "Why did you come so quickly?" Riker didn't look away from the stars. His voice was calm. We were already watching. Korloth felt his chest tighten. You were expecting this war? Riker shook his head slightly. No. We were expecting someone to ask. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, more human ships arrived. They didn't flash lights or send messages. They simply took position in the black sky. Quiet. Still. The Alliance leaders began to receive strange reports. Enemy ships were leaving their own space. Some were flying without direction. Some had dropped all power. Entire fleets had started to move away from the battle. It didn't make sense. One leader turned to Velra. Why are they running? Velra stared at the human ships. Because they don't want to find out what happens next. The humans began to set up structures on the captured planet. No one knew what they were building. Some of the towers reached into the clouds. Others were placed underground. When the Alliance tried to ask, the humans replied with one sentence. It's for defense. But defense from what? There was no enemy nearby anymore. No one was attacking. Yet the humans kept building, planning, preparing. It felt like they were waiting for something else, something bigger. Korloth asked Riker about the new towers. Riker gave him a long look before answering. We don't fix problems halfway, he said. We end them. The words stayed with Korloth. He repeated them in his mind again and again. End them, not stop, not pause. End. In another part of the command ship, a group of young alien officers were watching a video recorded from a human training session. They didn't understand most of it. The human codes, their hand signals, even their machines were all strange. One officer said, they train like they're in the middle of a war even when there's no danger. Another replied, maybe that's why they never lose. Some of the officers started copying the human drills trying to learn, but they couldn't keep up. The humans didn't slow down. They didn't explain. They didn't need to. Elsewhere, an old scientist studied a piece of human technology. It was no bigger than a fruit, but the readings showed enough energy inside to power an entire city for a month. He turned to his assistant. This is not from a peaceful people, he said. What do we do with it? The assistant asked. The scientist looked toward the human ship in the sky. We give it back, and we stay out of their way. But not everyone agreed. In a private room, two Alliance leaders spoke in low voices. They don't follow orders, one said. They don't need us, the other replied. They act like the war belongs to them now. It's starting to feel like we invited something we don't understand, or something we can't stop. They were right to worry. In the following days, the humans didn't rest. They moved to another planet where the enemy was still holding power. Before the Alliance could prepare its strategy, the humans had already arrived. They didn't wait for orders. They didn't ask for help. When the Alliance fleet reached the planet's orbit, it was over. The enemy base was empty, not destroyed, empty. Everything had been taken apart, cleanly and quickly. There was no battle, no signs of damage. Just silence. 1. Scout sent a final report. They didn't fight. They just left, as if they knew humans were coming. The Alliance leaders now sat in a different kind of silence. It wasn't fear of the enemy anymore. It was fear of their own decision. They had called for help, and help had come. But the humans weren't just helping. They were leading, controlling, changing the way war was fought. And they were very good at it. Velra looked at the screen showing the human fleet. What do we do if they don't leave? She asked. No one had an answer, because deep down they all knew the truth. The humans hadn't come to join the war. They had come to finish it. The sky above the seventh moon of Katoris was quiet. Too quiet. There were no enemy signals, no communication, and not even a sign of patrol ships. But the silence was not peaceful. It was strange, almost like the enemy had vanished without a trace. The Alliance ships floated slowly in orbit, scanning for any signs of activity. Nothing responded. Commander Riker stood on the deck of the human flagship, his eyes locked on the readings coming through his data lens. His expression did not change, but his silence made the others in the room uneasy. There was something about him that always kept people guessing. He spoke only when needed, and he watched everything like he knew more than he ever said out loud. A message came through from the Alliance scouts. "We are not detecting any life signals from the surface. Should we proceed?" Riker gave a short answer. "Wait." Down in the Alliance command ship, Velra watched the data feeds in frustration. "Why is he waiting?" she asked. "There's nothing there. They can move in." But Korloth shook his head slowly. "If he's waiting, there's a reason." Riker paced slowly around the command deck of his ship. He tapped a button on his wrist, sending a signal. Immediately, small human drones launched from hidden ports along the sides of the ship. They moved like shadows, fast and quiet. Within minutes, they were gone, already deep within the moon's atmosphere. Back in the human ship, one of Riker's officers turned to him. "Do you think they're hiding?" Riker nodded once. Not just hiding, preparing. The Alliance had assumed the enemy was broken, running scared from the earlier human actions. But Riker knew better. His team had studied many species, and the ones that backed away quietly weren't always done fighting. The drones returned, and the images they brought back were strange. The enemy bases were not abandoned. They were still active, but hidden under the surface, buried under layers of stone and shield tech. Riker watched the video feed carefully. On the screen, a group of workers were moving supplies underground. They were quiet, careful, not rushed. They weren't escaping, they were waiting. Riker turned to his second-in-command. "They know we're coming. They want us to walk into the trap." The Alliance leaders were stunned when they received the update. They built a second base. "Under the first one?" Velra asked, confused. "They never stopped building," Korloth said. "They just changed the location." Now the humans had a decision to make. They could go in carefully or let the Alliance take the lead. But Riker surprised everyone. He didn't do either. He called for a meeting. For the first time, he invited the full Alliance leadership aboard the human flagship. The meeting room was cold and quiet. Long windows showed a view of the stars, but no one looked at them. All eyes were on Riker. He didn't waste time. "You brought us here because you were losing," he said. "Now you are winning. But do you know why?" No one answered. Riker continued. "It's not just our machines, it's not our tactics, it's our way of thinking." He tapped on the table and a screen appeared. It showed maps, old battles, and moments when the enemy had outsmarted the Alliance. "You play by rules," Riker said. "You hope for mercy. You wait before you act. That's why you were losing." Velra leaned forward. "And you?" Riker looked directly at her. "We don't wait." The room went quiet. Riker explained the next plan. They wouldn't attack the hidden base directly. Instead, they would give the enemy a choice. A false opening, something to pull them out of hiding. The humans had done this before, many times. Korloth raised an eyebrow. "You want them to come to us?" "They will," Riker said, "when they think they have the upper hand." It was risky, but the Alliance agreed. They would pretend to retreat. One by one, their ships moved away from the moon's orbit just far enough to make it look like they had lost interest. The enemy saw the change. They believed the humans had given up. And that's when they started moving. The hidden base opened. Its doors. Small craft began launching, scanning the area. They thought the sky was clear. That's when the humans acted, but not with fire or noise. They simply activated a hidden signal. Across the moon's orbit, quiet beacons that had been secretly placed by human drones came to life. A web of light covered the area, an invisible net, cutting off escape routes, blocking communications. The enemy tried to respond, but they were surrounded without even knowing it. Inside the Alliance command ship, Velra whispered, "They didn't fight. They just trapped them." And it worked. The enemy fell into panic, unsure how they were caught so easily. Without a single shot, they lost their advantage. Their hidden position was no longer secret. Their quiet plans were undone. Afterward, Riker gave a short report to the Alliance Council. They built walls, we walked through them, he said. They thought we would charge. We waited. That is the difference. But something else was happening behind the scenes. The humans had started building more than defense towers. They were creating command posts, communication lines, and satellite systems that linked the war zones directly to Earth. Quietly, they were placing themselves at the center of every plan, every movement. Some of the Alliance leaders started to see the pattern. Velra met with Korloth in private. "Do you see it?" she asked. Korloth nodded. "Yes. We called them to help win a war. But they're not just fighting the enemy. They're changing the way the Alliance works," Velra said, "and we're letting them." Korloth looked at the stars outside the window. He remembered the old times, the old ways of fighting. Honor, defense, waiting until you must act. Now, things were faster, sharper, more controlled by the humans. They didn't take power, he said. We gave it to them. The war wasn't over yet, but already the future looked different, and Earth was at the center of it. The deep hum of the human flagship filled the command room as the stars drifted past the thick viewports. The Alliance leaders gathered once more, their faces a mixture of awe and unease. The quiet confidence of the humans was unlike anything they had ever seen before. It was clear now. This was no ordinary force sent merely to help. They were something far more deliberate, far more purposeful. Commander Riker stood near the center of the room, silent for a moment, letting the weight of the situation settle over everyone. Then he spoke, his voice steady and calm. "You wanted help to win this war, but winning is only the beginning." Velra looked at him sharply. "What do you mean? We don't understand your plans." Riker smiled slightly, not a friendly smile, but one that carried quiet certainty. War is not just about battlefields and enemies. It's about what comes after. About who controls the peace. That statement hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. The Alliance leaders exchanged uneasy glances. For generations, they had fought wars with clear rules and clear goals. But these humans were changing the game. The humans were already building new structures on the outer planets of the system. Communication hubs, supply depots, and training centers. They weren't just supporting the Alliance's fight, they were shaping the future of the entire sector. Korloth turned to Velra. "They are not here to follow. They are here to lead." Riker addressed the room again. "We offer something new. A way to end this conflict quickly and avoid the long years of loss you have suffered. But it will require trust. It will require change." Velra's voice trembled slightly. "Trust? You barely explain anything. How can we trust something we don't understand?" Riker's eyes softened. "Because you have no choice." The Alliance fleet had begun to notice changes in how the humans operated. Their technology was advanced beyond anything seen before, yes, but more than that, their tactics were different. They moved silently, like shadows, avoiding unnecessary contact. When they did act, it was precise, clean, and swift. At a distant outpost, the enemy's forces were losing hope, not because of violence or force, but because the humans cut off their supplies, communications, and alliances one by one. Slowly, the enemy became isolated and confused. They had no clear enemy to fight, only shadows that moved too fast and vanished without a trace. Inside the human flagship, training sessions were constant. Young humans drilled their minds and bodies to be ready for any situation. But what surprised the Alliance most was the human focus on negotiation, communication, and understanding. They spoke often with allies and even with some enemy defectors, turning enemies into friends without a fight. Korloth was amazed. They don't only win by force, they win by making friends. Velra nodded slowly. That changes everything. But the Alliance was not united. Some leaders feared the humans. They whispered behind closed doors, worried that Earth's influence would grow too large. that their own traditions and freedoms would be lost. Others welcomed the change, hoping that the humans would bring peace faster than any alien power could. One night, as the Alliance ships orbited the distant moon of Zarnus, Riker stood alone on the observation deck. He looked out at the stars and thought about what had brought him here. Not just the call for help, but something deeper. A duty to protect his home and ensure a future where humans and allies could live without fear. A young Alliance officer approached quietly. "Commander, the Council wants to know your next move." Riker turned slowly. "Tell them this is not just a battle for territory. It's a battle for trust, and trust takes time." The officer nodded and left. Meanwhile, deep underground on Zarnus, the enemy gathered. They had lost many battles but had not lost hope. They watched the humans carefully and knew they needed a new plan. One that didn't rely on strength, but on outthinking the humans. If they could find a weakness, any weakness, they could turn the tide. Back on the human flagship, Riker and his team prepared for their next mission. It wasn't about winning a battle, it was about building a future. A future where war might not be needed at all. The Alliance leaders watched nervously as the humans moved forward with quiet confidence. The war was changing, the rules were changing, and the galaxy was watching. As the stars stretched across the sky, one thing was clear: the humans had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Alliance ships drifted silently in the vast darkness, their lights faint against the glittering stars. The calm was misleading. Every officer aboard knew the war was far from over. The humans had shifted the balance, but the enemy remained stubborn, hiding in shadows, watching for any mistake. Commander Riker stood at the helm of the flagship, eyes focused on the blinking signals coming from deep space. A new challenge was approaching, one unlike any before. The briefing room was filled with tense faces. Velra and Korloth sat among the Alliance leaders, all eager to hear what the humans planned next. Riker stepped forward, his calm presence demanding attention. "There is no easy victory," he said. "Our enemy is clever. They do not fight openly anymore. Instead, they use tricks and secrets. We must be smarter." The room grew quiet. The Alliance leaders had hoped the humans would simply overpower the enemy. But Riker's words reminded them of a harsher truth. This was a war of patience and minds, not just weapons. Riker continued, "We have found signs of a new network underground. The enemy is building a web of control, communications, supply lines, even alliances with hidden factions. We cannot stop them by attacking their bases. We must cut the web at its core." Velra leaned forward, eyes sharp. "How do we find this core?" Riker smiled, though it was not a happy smile. "We use what the enemy fears most: themselves." A plan formed quickly. The humans would send a small team on a covert mission, not to fight, but to listen and learn. Using advanced human technology, the team would intercept secret communications and gather intelligence on the enemy's hidden connections. The mission was dangerous. If discovered, the team would be trapped deep behind enemy lines. But the information they could gain was priceless. The Alliance agreed. Weeks passed in tense silence. The covert team moved like shadows, unseen and unheard. They uncovered surprising truths. The enemy was divided, with some factions growing tired of the endless war, others hungry for power and willing to betray their own. This internal conflict was a key weakness. Back on the flagship, Riker studied the new intelligence. He knew how to use it. The humans would reach out, not with weapons but with offers of peace to those factions willing to break away. Velra was skeptical. "Do you think they will trust us?" Riker nodded. "Some will. Fear can turn to hope, if the right words are spoken." The first contact was made with a small enemy group hidden on a distant asteroid. The humans offered safety, resources, and a chance for a new life away from the endless war. To everyone's surprise, the faction accepted. The news spread quickly, shaking the enemy's fragile unity. More groups considered the offer. The war began to change from a fight between enemies to a struggle within the enemy ranks. The Alliance, watched in wonder as humans showed not just strength but wisdom. They had turned the battlefield into a place of negotiation and chance. But there were risks. Some factions did not want peace. They saw the humans as invaders, threats to their power. They moved quickly to strike back, not with force but with sabotage and lies. Rumors spread that the humans were spies, tricksters who could not be trusted. The Alliance had to fight these rumors to keep their fragile peace. Korloth spoke to Velra in private. The humans are changing everything, not just the war but how we see it. Velra nodded. It's hard to believe, but maybe this is the way forward. Riker prepared for the next phase, a grand summit, a meeting of former enemies and allies alike. It would be the first time in decades that such a gathering happened without fear of attack. The summit's goal was simple: build a new future where war was no longer the answer. As ships from all sides gathered, the humans took the lead in creating a space where voices could be heard, where fears could be shared, and where hope could grow. The room was filled with tension, but also a quiet excitement. For the first time, the enemy was not just an enemy. They were potential partners. Velra watched Riker speak. "This is more than a war," he said. "It is a chance to build a future." Outside, the stars shone brightly, as if watching the beginning of a new era. The war was not over, but the battle for peace had begun. The grand hall was quiet, filled with whispers and shifting eyes. Ships from distant worlds hovered silently outside the massive windows, their lights reflecting off polished floors. This was a place no one imagined seeing so soon, a meeting of former enemies and uneasy allies. Commander Riker stood at the front, his gaze steady and calm. The moment was heavy. The fate of many worlds hung on what was to be said here. The opening words came from Velra, who addressed the crowd with unexpected strength. "We have fought long and hard. We have lost much. But today, we choose a different path." The room stirred. Some faces were skeptical, others hopeful. Among the guests were representatives of enemy factions once thought unbreakable, now hesitant but willing to listen. The humans' quiet confidence had softened the hardest hearts. Riker stepped forward, his voice clear. "War has taught us many lessons, but the greatest is this: strength is not always shown in battle. Sometimes strength is shown in forgiveness and trust." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We stand here not to continue old conflicts, but to build a future together." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. For many, this was a new idea, one they had never imagined possible. Velra watched carefully. "What do you want? From us?" A leader from an enemy faction asked, his voice wary. Riker smiled slightly. "We want partnership. We want peace. We want to protect all our homes from destruction, but peace requires work from everyone." The talks were long and difficult. Old wounds reopened, old fears surfaced, but through patience, honest words, and the example of the humans' calm determination, progress was made. Outside the hall, hidden from view, the Alliance fleets remained alert. They knew not everyone was ready to trust this new way. Some factions still prepared for war, hoping the summit would fail. But inside, change was already happening. Secret meetings between former enemies led to new agreements. Trade routes reopened. Communication lines were restored. The fragile threads of peace began to weave a new web. Riker knew this was only the beginning. Peace was not won by speeches alone. It was built by daily actions, by trust earned step by step. He met with Velra after the summit. "This is just the first step," he said. "We have opened a door, but we must walk through it carefully." Velra nodded. "The Alliance is watching. Some will resist, but many see the truth." As the days passed, more and more joined the effort. The humans shared technology that could help rebuild destroyed worlds, improve communication, and provide food and medicine. Old enemies began to work side by side, learning from each other. One evening, Riker stood alone on the observation deck looking out at the stars. The war was not over. But a new hope burned brightly. He thought of Earth, the planet that had sent humans to the stars, not just to fight, but to change the way the galaxy lived. In the quiet, a message came through, a simple phrase from a former enemy leader now turned ally. "Thank you for showing us a better way." Riker allowed himself a small smile. The future was uncertain, but for the first time it felt possible. The alliance was no longer just about war. It was about peace, about building a new galaxy together. And that was a story worth fighting for.